and thank you for joining us for another episode of I'll Allow It Nevada, your go-to podcast for insightful glimpses into the Nevada judiciary. I'm your host, Seth Beasley, representing Supreme Court of Nevada Administrative Office of the Courts. Today, I'm excited to welcome Kate McCloskey, the Guardianship Compliance Program Manager from the AOC. Kate is going to walk us through the important work of the Guardianship Compliance Office, an essential resource that helps Nevada's courts oversee guardianship cases, ensure accountability, and implement best practices. Kate, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So to kind of just start this conversation off, let's just start with kind of an overview of what the Guardianship Compliance Office is, how it came about, and its essential functions. So what prompted the creation of the Guardianship Compliance Office?
Sure. So several years ago, Nevada experienced some challenges with the administration of guardianship. Prior to 2014, for example, there was very inconsistent supervision of guardianship cases, and those failed to protect vulnerable individuals who were under guardianship for both minors and adults. And this led to some abuse and exploitation by their guardians. This led to what I like to call the troubles. So there were national news articles related to significant abuses throughout Nevada by guardians. So in 2015, as a result of all of that, the Supreme Court created the commission to study the administration of guardianship in Nevada's courts. And they did that, of course, in response to that series of high-profile cases, which involved significant guardianship abuses. So that commission met about 15 times and received presentations from many experts in the field, and also included extensive public comment. And then in 2016, that commission released a report of final recommendations. And part of those recommendations included significant legislative changes, as well as the creation of my office. So my office, as a result of the 79th legislature, was created.
So it officially existed as of 2016, is that correct?
2017, July 2017, that budget year, fiscal year, we were authorized. We didn't technically open until January of 2018. It took several months for the court to kind of create a place for the office, do the hiring, that kind of stuff.
Establish it.
Establish it. So I was first hired in January of 2018, as were my first two staff. And then my second two staff were hired, I believe, in March of 2018. The role of our office really is to provide investigation and audit services to district courts for the administration of guardianship. So we actually serve the lifespan in terms of guardianship. So we conduct audits for minor guardianships as well as adult guardianships. We also do investigations for minor guardianships as well as adult guardianships. There are two exceptions to that. In the Second Judicial District Court, they have their own private investigators for minor guardianships. The Eighth also has their own investigation unit for minor guardianships. But for all the other courts, district courts, we do those minor guardianship investigations.
Okay, so how does that collaboration with the district courts work? Do they have to request your assistance?
Yeah, we need to be court ordered in by the guardianship judge, and then that court order provides us the authority to either do the audit, investigation, or both, whatever they're ordering us in for. So the types of investigations we do, oftentimes if a guardian hasn't reported to the court, hasn't submitted their annual report or accounting, the court has lost contact, we'll be ordered in to go locate and investigate the well-being of the protected person. If there are concerns for health, safety, and welfare, we'll also be court ordered in to investigate that. So we do a variety of different types of investigations.
Okay, so let's dive into that. So the makeup of your team, I know you kind of mentioned it already, but can you kind of just go into that, the makeup of your team, what types of investigators you have and the type of investigations they're doing?
Sure. So I have two financial forensic specialists
Financial forensic. Okay.
Financial forensic specialists. It's kind of a mouthful. And they are responsible to do estate audits, so guardianship estate audits. And we have audited estates worth less than 10,000 to some several million or more.
Oh, wow.
So it's a wide variety of types of audits or type of estates that we audit. So for our investigations, again, we do minor and adult guardianships. The most common types of investigations are concerns related to health, safety, and welfare.
Okay.
So if there have been adult protective services investigations or concerns about guardianship abuses or neglect, we're called in to investigate that. We do not substantiate. That's for adult protective services or child protective services. What our function is to gather all sorts of information for the judge so they can make good informed decisions related to that guardianship, whether it's qualifications of the guardian or the best placement for the protected person. It just depends on those individual circumstances. And again, we do a lot of what I call locations. So when the court loses contact, we'll go out and locate protected people and guardians who have lost contact. We actually have a very high success rate. I believe it's 98 or 99%.
Oh, wow.
I'd have to double check that, but it's very high.
Nice.
So we're quite proud of that.
Yeah, she should be. Okay. So as part of the Guardianship Compliance Office's role, is part of that providing best practices to district courts? And if so, do you have some best practices you provide them?
Yes, I work closely with the Permanent Guardianship Commission, which establishes best practices as well as court rules related to guardianship. The commission proposes those as well as legislative change. In addition, I believe it was in 2021, my office received a grant through the Administration on Community Living, where one of our goals was to assess guardianship practices and case management systems throughout the state in each district court. And we contracted with the National Center for State Courts to conduct that assessment. One of the goals of the Guardianship Commission is to develop practices and standards that support consistency in the administration of guardianship across all district courts. And like I had mentioned earlier, there was significant legislative change in 2017 related to guardianship. But we, as a state, didn't have a way of assessing the effectiveness or the impact of those legislative changes. So we wanted to look at what practices were out there, how those legislative changes occurred throughout the state. So now the commission is looking at the recommendations that the National Center put forth in their report so that we can start looking at and prioritizing some improvements. And one example is we need to be able to better collect data on a statewide basis versus a local related to guardianship. To this day, I don't think we could say statewide how many active guardianship cases we have because each district court has their own case management system.
I see.
We could not give you the demographics of people under guardianship as well for the same reason. So as part of that grant and as part of those recommendations that the National Center made, we've spent the past several years at the AOC, the Administrative Office of the Courts here, developing a guardianship portal that will help us collect that information and as well as this district courts in being able to better monitor their guardianship cases for compliance.
Okay, so this guardianship portal will be for the district courts to use, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it's for tracking the guardianship cases.
It will allow for that.
Okay,
yes. So it also provides district courts with easier methods to be able to monitor their guardianship cases. So court users will have dashboards that will tell them what guardians are coming due for 3-year reviews, for their annual reporting. So, when we initially did our assessment with the National Center, there were some courts whose case management systems didn't have the ability to help them monitor in an electronic way.
Like tracking like when they need to check in and things
Correct.
like that?
So we had some with Excel spreadsheets that were very large. Others had sticky notes, So this provides them a more efficient way to be able to monitor their guardianship cases.
Okay.
In addition, it will allow for better monitoring of the quality of the reporting. So there'll be built-in alerts for court staff. So as the guardian enters in their annual accounting, for example, it will red flag, for example, if there are excessive ATM withdrawals, it'll red flag, you might want to look at this. So that'll help court users better be able to look at those accountings and determine if they do need an audit or not, or look into that accounting more. For guardians, it's almost like a TurboTax function for them, if you think about it. So as they're entering in their accountings in the background, the portal will be doing all the math, all the calculations for the beginning and ending balances. Same thing for the inventories. The guardian will also get alerts through the portal for reminders. So don't forget, in 30 days, your annual accounting is due. You have to hit submit, or, however it comes out to look. So we want the portal to be very user-friendly for all users. So that would include guardians as well as court users.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, you probably mentioned, so this is something, this portal is being developed, or it's been developed, it's currently in use?
It's not currently in use yet. It is in development. We're actually at the end user testing phase. So from now to the beginning of the year, we have actual guardians and court users and judges who will be testing it and providing us feedback based on their experience and interaction with the system. And then we'll tweak it. And then hopefully we'll be able to pilot it with some pilot sites this summer.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this episode of I'll Allow It Nevada. We're always striving to bring you valuable insights and education, not just for judicial officers, but for anyone interested in the Nevada judiciary. If you find our content helpful or intriguing, please share your experiences with your friends, family, and colleagues. Your support helps us reach a broader audience and ensures that more people can benefit from our discussions. Thank you for listening and supporting I'll Allow It Nevada. Before we dive in, I want to talk about the guardianship training you have. How does the Guardianship Compliance Office engage with guardians and family members outside of that to ensure accountability and transparency?
So there are a couple of different ways that me and my staff engage with family guardians, or even the public in general. We do have a toll-free hotline where they can call. If they see any potential guardianship abuses or concerns, they can report that. And then I, in turn, due to Supreme Court Guardianship Rule 5, am able to report any significant concerns to the district court. That rule allows ex parte communication under those circumstances. But that hotline, more frequently than not, is used for questions related to guardianship. So how do I do something? How do I petition, or how do I let a court know X, Y, or Z? So we're able to help them connect to community resources, whether it's the Self-Help Center or the Nevada Bar to their Find an Attorney program, or to senior centers if it's a social services question, or aging and disability services referrals. So we engage that way with the community. In addition, through our audits, oftentimes, and our investigations, oftentimes what we find is there isn't intentional bad stuff going on within a guardianship. It's sometimes the guardian just doesn't know better. So we can help guide them, again, to resources within their community that can help them get their questions answered or their needs met. That being said, as part of the grant I mentioned earlier, one of the recommendations from the National Center is training on guardianship for family guardians, which is the majority of guardians in the state of Nevada, are family guardians, but also judicial officers. So over the past several years, we've worked to develop training for judicial officers. That'll be online, hopefully coming soon. And in addition, family guardian training, which I'm hoping, well, it's the end of October now. Hopefully in November, we'll be able to publish that and send that out to courts and other community agencies and libraries.
Okay, so there's going to be guardianship training for judicial officers and for family guardians. What kind of topics are to be covered in this training?
So for family guardians, it contains multiple topics from, do I really need this guardianship? This training is geared for adult guardianships. We have not yet developed a training for minor guardianships, so I'm talking right now for adult guardianships. Okay. But so it covers consideration points for families as they're thinking about how do we support this adult person now. So people sometimes don't realize how restrictive guardianship can be. Mm-hmm. I know one judge who hears guardianship cases and also criminal cases, and he often says that the people that he commits to prison have more rights than someone who's under guardianship. Oh, wow. So it's an extremely restrictive intervention, and one that should be used as a last resort.
Carefully considered.
Very carefully considered. So part of the education there is around what are some alternatives that are available to families, whether it be supported decision-making, a power of attorney, or a post, or even a special needs trust. So we go over that. We also go over the process of, okay, if you've determined that guardianship is the best option, how do you do that? So it brings you through the petition and the entire process. And then we also educate them regarding their responsibilities once they become guardians. So the annual reporting, what they can and can't do, what they are and are not responsible for. And then finally, just preparing them for how you handle yourself in a court setting, whether that's in person or many guardianship courts now use Zoom. So how do you behave on a Zoom court hearing as well?
Etiquette and
yeah.
Okay. So the development of this training, is it in response to anything in particular? Have you found that there's been a knowledge gap in the case of adult family guardians?
Yes. So under Nevada revised statutes, our judges have the ability to order a guardian to have training, but there has not been a statewide training available to courts. So I know the Second Judicial District Court has their own training, and I believe there might be training available in Southern Nevada, but for the rest of the state, there hasn't been a resource. So this will fit that need. It was also a recommendation made by the National Center for State Courts during their assessment. So we wanted to be able to fill that gap. In addition, we have the judicial officer training that will be coming out here shortly. And that is also as a result of that assessment that was done by the National Center for State Courts. Guardianship it's kind of unique. It's a bit different than other court case types. And there's not a lot of training available for attorneys and judicial officers. So we wanted to be able to meet that need as well. So that training, again, we developed actually both trainings. We did a training needs assessment. So what is it guardians and judges and attorneys need to know? So we went to stakeholders and asked them. Based on the results of that training needs assessment, we were able to develop both trainings. So for judicial officers, many of them actually asked for, we don't know what alternatives are out there.
I see. So
we have a nice segment on other options aside from guardianship are available. We go over best practices in the administration of guardianship. So we talk about how best to monitor them. What are the best practices when you're looking at an accounting? What are you looking for? Those types of things. So we have a segment related to capacity assessments as well. What are they? How do they come about? What is it that neuropsychologist maybe is doing? And how does that differ from legal? So medical capacity versus legal capacity is discussed as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it has lots of information for judges that they aren't going to get in law school, or maybe not even as they're practicing as an attorney or a judge.
Right, because it's just such a unique case.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the training for judicial officers is expected towards the end of November. Is that when the training for family guardians are expected to be available?
So the family guardian training is completed. So it's been approved by the Administration for Community Living. And right now we're getting it into our learning management system, hopefully developing a certificate for guardians that they can show the judge, yeah, I completed it. And then we're also developing some marketing tools. So once all of that is done, it's in our learning management system. We have the certificate. Then we can go out and tell courts and other community agencies and organizations that it's available on our website.
Okay.
So hopefully that'll happen in November, depending on how quickly we can get it into the LMS.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for the judicial training, I'm hoping in the next couple of months. The Administration on Community Living just had a few tweaks that they wanted put in there. So we're making those changes. And once they're finally approved, we'll do the same process, get it into the learning management system. Hopefully, we'll be able to get continuing education credit is my goal. And then we would send it out to courts.
Okay, so can you possibly speak a little bit on because I didn't know about this before I was preparing for this podcast, the Protected Persons Bill of Rights. So can you just kind of provide an overview of that and its key provisions?
So the Protected Persons Bill of Rights is part of that 2017 legislation that went through.
Okay.
And what it did was codified certain rights for people under guardianship. And this, of course, was a result of the problems that we had in prior years. So some of the, I think, most important provisions is in the Bill of Rights, as well as other parts of NRS after 2017, a person who is proposed to be under guardianship, so there's a petition for guardianship,
okay,
they have a right to legal counsel that will be paid for. So we have legal aid services in Nevada who provide legal services free of cost, so free for the person proposed to be under guardianship. So that attorney, if the court finds that the proposed protected person does indeed lack capacity and needs a guardian, that attorney stays with them through the entirety of the guardianship case. So they always have legal representation, and that attorney represents that person's desires and wishes. If there's not an attorney-client relationship, then they look out for the best interests of that person and ensures that due process occurs. So things that had happened in the past, it's harder to happen now because they have an advocate, they have legal counsel. Yeah. I think that was one of the most significant changes after 2017, and it is codified now. The Bill of Rights also ensures that the courts consider the least restrictive alternative for the protected person, that their desires are considered, that their goals are considered through the administration of guardianship, that the protected person cannot be restricted from communications with loved ones or isolated from loved ones unless that goes through court process. So if there's a need for a restriction because someone might be dangerous to the protected person, that needs to go before the judge, and the judge will rule on it. But a guardian can't just say, so-and-so, you cannot have contact with the protected person. It has to go through a judicial oversight. Yeah.
Okay.
They have a right now to remain as independent as possible. Again, we're talking about lesser restrictive alternatives for people. So a guardian can't just put someone in a locked facility. They have to put them in a place that best meets their needs, but is the least restrictive.
Okay. I see.
There's a lot more to it, but I think
sure,
those
yeah.
are the high priority. I could probably talk about it all day, but.
Is this the Protected Person Bill of Rights? Is that going to be covered at all in the training?
It's covered in both trainings.
Okay.
So it's covered in the family guardian training as well as the judicial officer training. Yes.
Okay. So I want to start kind of rounding out this conversation. Since the Guardianship Compliance Office's inception, has your guys' work evolved at all?
I mean, our basic core function is to provide audits and investigations for district courts. And we've done that. We've done over 1,600 since 2018 combined audits and investigations throughout the state. The impact has been we've been able to identify a significant amount of money at risk of loss, and due to a variety of different reasons that allow then for repayment of that loss to guardianship estates. So we have had an impact that way. The first few years, we were really getting our feet wet, learning our own best practices in terms of investigations and audits and what processes worked best for us. But since then, again, we've been focused on our grant that in 2021 we got. So we are hoping to have, a positive impact on courts to provide them with resources to make their jobs easier in terms of administering and monitoring guardianships. My next goal, once I wrap these projects up, so we have the portal out there and running, courts using it, the training up and running, is to address minor guardianships. Our focus in the past few years has been adult guardianships because the grant that we received was specific for older Americans and adults with disability.
I see.
But there are areas of minor guardianship, I think, that we can work on, and I hope to work closely with the Guardianship Commission on that.
Okay, so you have a lot going on. There's the training, there's the guardianship portal. So it sounds like looking ahead, a priority will be putting trainings out there regarding minor guardianship. The work of the Guardianship Compliance Office it's important, and it sounds very impactful. Do you have, I don't know, maybe it's kind of hard, but do you have like a success story or something that kind of illustrates the office's impact since 2017?
So many of them. I'm thinking of a couple of individuals where we did investigations where the protected person had issue with their guardian, right? There were, I don't want to go into too many specifics because I don't want to identify anyone. There were issues with their relationship, kind of some power struggles going on. And because of some of the information and resources we were able to find within the community the protected person lived, they were able to work with their counsel, the protected person, to develop supports and services within the community so that a guardianship was no longer necessary.
Oh, wow.
And I think those are some of the biggest successes that I see in guardianship, not just through my office, but just in witnessing and viewing guardianship cases overall, is when a team comes together around someone, and they wrap themselves around a person so that guardianship is not necessary. So the person can retain their rights and make decisions with support. I think those are the biggest success stories that I've seen.
So biggest successes for protected persons is not to need to be under a guardianship.
Yeah, especially for young adults with disability. And then for some of our older folks where, they may be at that beginning of dementia, they can still make a lot of decisions for themselves. But again, they need help and support, but not necessarily a decision maker. So I think those are some really nice success stories I've seen that have helped reduce the need for guardianship in Nevada. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. So before we close this out, is there any last things you'd like to share with our listeners? I know we covered a lot, so...
I think just be on the lookout for the trainings. Hopefully they'll be coming out soon. You can always contact our office if you have questions about what my office does. And we'd be happy to help you in any way we can, whether it's through a referral to an agency that can get your needs met, or if it's a judge who'd like more information about our investigations or audits or how we could help, give us a shout out.
Awesome. Well, Kate, thank you very much for joining me. This has been a very interesting conversation, and there's a lot of stuff to come for the Guardianship Compliance Office. You guys are doing a lot of great stuff, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you for having me.
A heartfelt appreciation to our guest and to everyone who's tuned into this episode. Before we wrap up, here are a couple of quick, important reminders. For continuing legal education credit, be sure to complete a certificate of attendance and email it to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, or comments, we welcome your input. Please email them to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. We value and look forward to hearing from our listeners. Stay tuned for more episodes of I'll Allow It Nevada, released bi-monthly. This is Seth Easley signing off. Take care, Nevada.